A huge thanks to 2K for sponsoring this video and providing the Steam key for the Gathering Storm expansion. Click the link in the description below for more info. Civilization 6 Gathering Storm brings with it a host of changes that aim to alter the landscape of the game forever. From natural disasters like volcanoes and floods, to storms at sea threatening your naval fleet, all the way to diplomacy at the World Congress, you can expect a significant change of pace with this latest expansion to Civilization 6. The entire idea behind Gathering Storm is to present nature as its own force to be reckoned with in the world of Civilization. In the past, it's been all well and good settling on the banks of a river or at the foot of a volcano. But now you're going to have to deal with the potential risks of doing just that. Floods are a very real threat. Of course, volcanic eruptions, also a very real threat. And while both of them present initial troubles and dangers, they can eventually leave you with things like fertile soil. So if you can take on a volcano or a flood and survive, then you can take on a volcano or a flood and probably thrive. Now, later on in the game, you'll not only have to deal with those natural disasters, you're also going to have to keep a keen eye on a potential global disaster caused by the very civilization that you have built and are trying to build. Global warming is a very real threat caused by the consumption of resources like coal and uranium, and it will directly impact on the CO2 levels around the world and potentially raise the temperature of the whole planet. This increasing temperature then leads to higher amounts of flooding, a higher frequency of storms, and may even cause some of your coastal cities to be lost and flooded by rising sea levels. Not only do you have to navigate these literal and metaphorical treacherous waters, you're also going to have to navigate the political landscape of the World Congress, a platform through which you can spend political favor, a new currency used to track diplomatic goodwill, and that you can use as a voting power when summoned to the World Congress every 30 turns, or during an emergency session of Congress to handle a very specific matter and to vote on something, again, very specific. Not only does this create a system through which you could ban furs or the chopping of rainforests, the whole thing could lead towards the new diplomatic victory, as long as you're willing to be BFFs with the rest of Congress, including the new leaders available in Gathering Storm. Thus far for me, I tend to just make everyone my enemy, go to war, and go for the traditional sort of, kill everyone that looks at me the wrong way, but that's besides the point. Speaking of those new leaders, Eleanor of Aquitaine actually comes as a first to the Civilization franchise, as she's able to lead two civilizations, that being England and France, each with their own set of perks. This is actually a reflection on her position as Queen Consort of France from 1131 to 1152, and of England from 1154 to 1189. Now, it's all well and good me sitting here and reading from my script and telling you everything there is to know about Gathering Storm, but I'm a firm believer in showing, not just telling, so let's talk about the gameplay that's on screen. First things first, it is running at 3 times speed because I have a total of 3 hours of gameplay I could show you. This is actually starting about an hour and a half into that, so about halfway through my recording. This is probably about halfway through, well, maybe 2/3 of the way through an entire game. And the first thing that's going to be coming up in just a second is actually the World Congress. And the World Congress, there it is fascinating. And that's something I really want to focus on and talk about because I've not experienced everything there is to experience in Gathering Storm. And I'm excited to do that. But what I'm most excited about is the political side of Civilization 6, thanks to this DLC, thanks to this expansion, because I think there is a very interesting conversation to be had there. Now, we're not going to talk about real-world politics. I'm going to keep this solely about the game. And I'd like to talk about 2 or 3 different experiences I've had with that Global Congress thus far in Gathering Storm. So the first one comes about in this game, and it was right at the start of this game that we're seeing here. Now, I'm playing as Eleanor. I'm actually Queen Consort of France at this point. So I've started on this True Start Europe map. We had Paris, we had something else. I don't know French cities. The point is, I founded Paris, and I believe about 20 to 30 turns into the game, I suddenly get another city. And I didn't found it, I didn't take it over, I just get one. And it turns out that the German capital rebelled and felt more French than they did German. So Germany was out of the game in about 30 turns. I'm not quite sure how that happened, but suddenly I had 2 cities. And then I went and founded another one, and then eventually another one. But I thought that was incredibly fascinating. Now, that's not the political side of things I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is the fact that later in the game, shortly after I've discovered Niter and when I'm working towards getting musketmen, the Netherlands declares a surprise war on me. And they start going for this formerly German city because it's the one that has Niter within its borders. It's the one that I'm going to use to start getting musketmen. Now, fortunately for me, in the northern parts of the UK towards Scotland, there is actually Niter there as well, so I had that coming in. Yes, I had the French go and occupy the UK, because of course I did. The point being that the Netherlands were trying to take this formerly German city, and eventually they do it. And then a World Congress is called. And it turns out there is a global discussion about whether or not we should rally behind me and try to take this city back, or whether or not we should leave the Netherlands to have that city. And obviously the Netherlands had declared a surprise war, so they had given a lot of reason for people to dislike them. There were grievances at play here, which is a mechanic in Gathering Storm. There's grievances at play. So there is reason for the other civilizations to say, you know what? You are not getting away with this. We are not letting you off with it. We are going to rally behind France. We are going to take that city back. Now, the worry here is one that I think is as old as the franchise itself. Essentially, I had allies. Now, we weren't formally in an alliance, but they were allies. We were all working towards the common goal of stopping the Netherlands from ruling that city and, taking land that they had no claim over. Unfortunately, because we weren't in this alliance and because of the nature of the game, Poland was actually the civilization that took back this city. Which meant that Poland owned the city and I didn't, despite me being the one that had lost it to begin with. But I thought the whole build-up to that was fascinating. I love the idea that the world is watching as the Netherlands takes a city and then they go, no, we can't let this happen. Let's hold a vote. Are we going to intervene here? And I had a fair amount of diplomatic favor, so I was able to make sure the vote was going to sway towards moving against them. Even though the vote, I believe, was about 20-4, and the 4 votes against were all from the Netherlands. Even with that, it was just interesting seeing the whole world rally around one cause. And that got me thinking about multiplayer, which is something I want to touch on in just a little bit. Moving on from this conflict with the Netherlands here, there was a lot of denouncing going on after this combat and this conflict. There was a lot of back and forth. There was a lot of talk, as there usually is. And me being me and having played games like Urban Empire and Democracy 3, and having played similar games to this where denouncing is a thing, I usually take that as a I take it as an insult, frankly, and I never really let it lie. I'm not the kind to go, you know what? You can denounce me all you like. I'm gonna be the bigger man. I'm never the bigger man. I'm the one that goes, oh yeah? Oh yeah? Well, here's a declaration of war. So I declare war on the Netherlands as they continue to denounce me on the global stage. And because I didn't necessarily have a valid reason to do this, suddenly there are some grievances against me. Now, with that said, I'm not hated on the global stage. I'm quite a popular figure at this point, so the grievances don't do too much to hurt me. But what happens is I eventually take over everything. The Netherlands are gone. But because I've been the aggressor here, because those grievances are there, because I've done things that are unnecessary, because I didn't have a valid claim to that land, everyone else is suddenly looking at me and going, what are you you're the aggressor. You are the bad guy here. You're the one at fault. So eventually I start getting denounced, and eventually a war is declared on me. A joint war is declared against me by 2 of the other civilizations. About 10 to 15 turns later, another joint war is declared from 2 of the other civilizations. So eventually it's everyone against me, which I was kind of prepared for. I knew it was coming with the denouncing, so I prepared my troops. I had some musketmen, I had some rangers, some cannons, some warriors, some crossbowmen, and of course I had my cities relatively well defended, so it wasn't a terrible situation to be in. It was a pain, but not a terrible situation, because I actually had an ace up my sleeve. This entire time I was sending envoys to city-states, and in doing this, I was giving myself city-states that would fight for me. So I had Armagh in Northern Ireland, I had Geneva fighting for me, and I think I had one other as well. But what was particularly interesting was that somewhere in the middle of this combat, one of the other civilizations sent more envoys to Geneva, which was on my doorstep. So Geneva suddenly turned around. They had been attacking the Spanish, but they suddenly turned around and started coming for me because suddenly they had a new ruler. So Geneva starts beelining it for me. I wipe out their troops, I wipe the floor with them, and I move down towards Geneva because it is the closest city to me that isn't owned by another civilization. It's just a city-state. So I move in, I take over Geneva, and suddenly another special seating, a special session of the World Congress is called, and suddenly I'm the target. Whereas before it had been the Netherlands moving wrongly against me, I had moved wrongly against Geneva. And because I was already at war with everyone, except I think by this stage one of them, I think I'd managed to convince the Spanish to stop fighting me at this point, suddenly everyone was against me. Now, I had a lot of political favor, I had a lot of diplomatic favor, so I tried to sway the vote to not go to war with me, but it wasn't enough. It was me versus 5 other civilizations. So suddenly this vote goes through, and suddenly I'm the bad guy. Suddenly I'm the target of an all-out war, and not just a war, an event. A campaign against me, where they have 30 turns to do what they need to do. Otherwise, I win. If I can last the 30 turns, I'm fine. And I think that's fascinating. I think that's exciting. It's whatever that word is. I really enjoy it. I get a lot of joy out of this political side of the game because it's a little bit different. Obviously, you have your usual surprise wars and this kind of war and that kind of war. But I think being the diplomat is a very interesting way to play this, even if I'm a pretty bad diplomat. I think the diplomacy and the politics are really interesting, really exciting, and I want to come around to talk about multiplayer like I said I was going to. And I haven't played multiplayer on Gathering Storm yet, but in my mind I can picture this situation where you're in a Discord call with your friends, and anytime a World Congress comes up, you're not just voting blindly, you're talking with them, you're saying, what are we working towards here? And then when someone suggests something a little bit strange, you take a moment and you go, hold on a minute. Why? Why do you want that? You're saying you want it for this reason. You're saying you want to, buff the trade route of this civilization, or you're saying that you want to embargo this civilization, or you're saying that you want to get more amenities from duplicates of this resource, or you want to block this resource or whatever. Why do you want to do that? And as the game progresses, everyone develops their own little political agenda. And everyone's sitting there going, I need this thing. I wonder if I could take it to the World Congress. Or perhaps someone does something they shouldn't do and it goes to World Congress and they have to try and justify it. So if I was in a multiplayer game, I would have to justify taking Geneva. Obviously, I can't do that to the AI, and the AI is smart but predictable. That's just kind of the nature of AI in video games. Good predictable, I'll admit. I'm not complaining about the AI, but I think predictable is the right word, because I know I'm not going to win that vote. It's obvious on other levels as well. Obviously, they all kind of dislike me, and some of them are already at war with me, so they're not going to side with me. But it was kind of obvious, especially having been on the other side of the table earlier in the game. It was quite obvious the AI were going to go, well, looky here. But in multiplayer, it's a completely different landscape. Because suddenly you are the politician. Suddenly you are trying to convince your friends that what you did was just. Suddenly you are trying to tell them that you did need to take Geneva and that you did have a right to take Geneva. Suddenly you have to convince your friends that what the Netherlands did was wrong. Suddenly you need to tell them why this surprise war was unjust. Suddenly, you need to remember, I have Niter in that territory. I'm on the brink of making musketmen. The Netherlands don't want me doing that. They want that power for themselves. They moved against me in an unjust manner to stifle my progress, to cripple my civilization, and for selfish means. And again, and I keep throwing this word out there and I keep throwing this word around, but I think that's fascinating. I think that's exciting, and I think that adds a whole nother level to running your civilization, especially in a multiplayer game. Now, to move on from the political side of things, because I've rambled about it for probably long enough, I will touch on the natural disasters a little bit. Now, I haven't had a whole lot of time with Gathering Storm just yet. There was a birthday in the family this past weekend, so I was unavailable for most of that time. And there's been some other commitments I've been all over the place this last 2 weeks, so I've not got to marathon this as much as I would like. Now, with that said, I have seen things like storms, I have seen volcanoes, and they're incredible things. They're very dynamic, and dynamic's sort of a buzzword, and I don't really like dynamic because everyone uses dynamic. It's dynamic. It's so dynamic. But it's one of those things, it's a random element. It's a random thing that just happens out of nowhere, and you have to deal with it. You have to make it work. Obviously, you kind of know it's going to happen. You know that this river has floodplains. You know that you're settling on lowlands, and you can even see the level at which your coastal city will flood. There's 3 levels. There's 1, 2, and 3. If it's 1, it's going to be the first place to flood, 2 is the second, 3 is the last one to flood at rising sea levels. Whereas with a volcano, you settle at the base of a volcano, and suddenly it's like, well, we know what's going to happen here eventually. Not only that, the surrounding tiles of a volcano can be impacted as well, so it's not just a case of settling at the base of it. You might want to settle a little bit further away from it, 2 to 3 tiles, then you can get the fertile soil afterwards, which again, you got to take the negatives and the positives. There is a positive to a volcano erupting. Now, again, I haven't had a whole lot of experience with the volcanoes, with the storms themselves. I did once see a tornado in Yorkshire. That was interesting. I was the English. I think I was Eleanor, Queen Consort of England at the time. I had London and Liverpool, I think. Obviously, Liverpool was actually in France at the time, which is okay. I'm pretty sure Sheffield was in Northern Ireland, so that was definitely not historically accurate. But as I'm doing my thing, as I'm trying to deal with, I think, the Romans at the time, which was a lot of fun, I suddenly get a thing that's like, hey, there's a storm brewing. And it takes me up to Yorkshire, and lo and behold, there's a tornado. There's just a tornado just going about. There's a little man in a flat cap and a waistcoat going, "Oi, up, that's a tornado right there." And it's just, he's flying away. There's not actually a little man in a flat cap and a waistcoat going, "Hey, up," but I could imagine there was, because that's most likely the reaction that a Yorkshireman would have. "Hey, up, lad, that's a tornado right there." I'm going to stop. The point is, Gathering Storm is an expansion that I think it's going to get me hooked in Civilization again. I've not played Civ 6 in a while. I don't think I played Rise and Fall. But I'm really excited, and not to sound like a broken record, I'm really excited for the political side of things. And as someone that really enjoys role-playing games, both in the sense of like Skyrim as an RPG, or role-playing within video games, where you sort of play a character yourself. And again, I mean in the sense of modded roleplay servers on games like Grand Theft Auto or Atlas. I think there's a really interesting side to Civilization 6 Gathering Storm, and I think that political side of it is going to be incredibly exciting for multiplayer games. It's going to be incredibly exciting for single-player games, because you are dealing with AI that is going to be predictable in one sense and a little strange in another, and lovingly strange. I kind of love that about Civilization AI. It sometimes does things that you don't expect it to do, and much like having to just deal with a flood or deal with a volcano, you kind of have to deal with the AI as well. I mean, I didn't expect the Netherlands to suddenly declare a surprise war on me. That was kind of out of nowhere, and I'm just assuming it was because I had Nitzer, but it might have just been because they kind of wanted to. They didn't dislike me. I didn't take anything from them. I'm pretty sure I was just a bit close to their borders and had a resource that they really wanted. But then that leads to those questions in my mind. It leads to those political situations. It leads to those thoughts about, why did they do it? Will it go to Congress? Will it not go to Congress? And then it leads to those thoughts about multiplayer. Ladies and gentlemen, I am 100% rambling here, but I think I at least hope that my rambling is getting across to you my excitement about Gathering Storm and about getting back into Civilization 6. This is a sponsored video, and I do want to there may be a little bit of a bias there. I can't say if there is or isn't, because generally we're not aware of our own biases. But, and I do mean this, I don't take sponsorships on things I'm not interested in or excited about. Civilization is one of those franchises that I've always been excited by. I've enjoyed watching. I've enjoyed playing it when I did Civilization Revolution on Xbox 360 on the Xbox Live Arcade. I loved that as well. I mean, you can say what you want about that. I know some people are in two minds, but I loved it. Civilization 5, I loved it. Pretty sure I played Civ 4 as well. And then, of course, other Sid Meier's games like Pirates. That was great. I do not take sponsorships or ad deals or whatever about things I don't care about, that I'm not interested in. So hopefully my rambling has given you an idea of how excited I am to put tens, if not hundreds of hours into Civilization 6 Gathering Storm. I would like to thank 2K once again for the game code for the DLC and for sponsoring this video. There will be a link in the description if you're interested in checking out Gathering Storm. There'll be some info down there on the sponsorship itself as well, if you're curious. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. There will be a full Let's Play coming up of Civilization 6 Gathering Storm in the next week or two, so do keep an eye out for that as well. Not quite sure who we'll be playing as just yet, but why not go ahead and leave your suggestions in the comments below, because, well, I've played as England and France thus far. There's other civilizations we could play as well. Maybe we should play on a map that does have an abundance of volcanoes. Either way, Thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, like the video. If you disliked it, then dislike it and leave a comment telling me why. And as always, I'll see you next time. Bye-bye!